All right, folks. Welcome everybody once again to Irish Sports Daily Power Hour. I am your host, Mike Frank, here with my good buddy Jamie Uyeyama, and we have Greg Flamong also producing the show. I want to apologize in advance. I'm dealing with some terrible allergies that have just been kicking my butt, Yama, and I'm just struggling over here. I don't know what's going on. This heat, everything has just been terrible, but hey, we're suffering through it. So we're gonna rally and get through this power hour. And but if I cough and all that type of stuff, I apologize in advance. Wanted to also mention it's a great time to sign up for Irish Sports Daily Power Hour, or I'm sorry, irishsportsdaily.com. You can go to the front page of irishsportsdaily.com, click on the premium section, and sign up today. Also wanted to mention, check us out on YouTube. Search for Irish Sports Daily there, and you can watch the show live if you want in Power Hour, where you can also subscribe and like our channel, which we'd greatly appreciate it. That will help us, as far as advertising, but it also helps you because you get the opportunity to know when all our content arrives, and also if we're live when you happen to visit YouTube. So make sure you do that. Also wanted to mention before we get going, there will be a Power Hour next week, but the following week, which I believe is the 7th, I'm not sure we will, or I know we won't have it then, so I'll be out on vacation. And I'm traveling back on the 14th, so I'm not sure that, I know I won't be back in time that time for the show, but we may have one later in the week. We may not. It just depends on how many of these announcements and stuff like that happen before, and we have a better understanding of where things are. So I'll let you know a little bit later on how that's looking as far as the week of the 14th and Power Hour. But the week of the 17th, the 7th, there will not be one. I will be on vacation. All right. Also, before we get going, I want to mention our sponsor, which is ESQ Clothing. ESQ has been making the best handmade custom suits, sport coats, tuxedos, and shirts for the last decade, and has been featured on GQ, ESPN, USA Today, and you've seen them dressing your favorite players and coaches. ESQ also gets the best fabric from Italy and England's top mills. With over 40,000 fabrics to choose from, you're guaranteed to look your best. Go visit esqclothing.com and book your appointment. Mention ISD, get 10% off your entire purchase. Once again, that's esqclothing.com. All right, so let's start the show by saying this, Jamie. Pretty much, whatever I said at the beginning of last week, where I said, we got to temper our expectations. There's no way they're going to get everybody. They're not going to get everybody. That never happens. It could happen. I mean, it very well could happen. I thought that they would do well. I thought that they'd probably get about 75% of these guys when push comes to shove. But really, there's a chance they could land every single guy they wanted. We'll see what happens when it's all said and done. Are they going to get Ian Primer? Are they going to get Jacobson? Those types of things we're not sure of. Obviously, Elijah Golden's still out there. Kaydon Finley's also still out there. There's lots of names that haven't committed yet. Fitzgerald, Robinson, all these guys. We'll get to all that. But, man, I'm telling you, the way this is trending, it's crazy. And I kind of put a post up on the board. I remember talking to Matt and to Christian after the official visits happened. And again, I've been through this a lot, and it usually sounds real positive after visits. Sometimes somebody will say, I don't know. And I don't think that went well. But I literally heard every single one was great. And I'm like, man, I guess they're getting everybody, just kind of joking. And man, you just never know. I mean, they may end up getting them all. So clearly there's been some big time news that happened since we last talked. And first of all, let's just start with today's news, which is Preston Fryzel committing, the first tight end in this class. A late offer, Jamie, but I like this guy a whole lot. I mean, I like this guy a lot. I think he's going to be a guy that may take a year to kind of fill out his body. he's just a different tight end than anybody they kind of have on their roster right now. Kind of shaped more like a Jack Larson, but I definitely think has more vertical ability. I think that maybe a little bit taller, but I think his overall agility and speed is better than Jack Larson. But I love this kid. Your thoughts on him?
I'm a huge fan of his as well, Mike. I think he's got dynamic ability. He's 220 pounds right now. He's gonna get bigger, but he doesn't have to be 260, right? And that's the thing that I think everybody kind of thinks that everyone needs to be a 260-pound inline blocking tight end. Well, half of what, if you look at like Mitchell Evans, who's like obviously 260 pounds, 50% of the time he's lined up in the slot. And that's something that I would expect for Fryzel. Like, that's what will probably happen to him, at Notre Dame, is he'll play primarily as like a bigger wide receiver for a lot of it and be a matchup problem. And I think, there's obviously a lot he's got to develop to become a more complete tight end, but he's got big time ball skills. I just think his whole package as a receiver, like what he can do after the catch, you're seeing it right here, right now, making this big play after the catch, but just his body control, just the overall ball skills, so much about him. I think it has a chance to really, really be a special thing for Notre Dame. And I think he's super underrated right now. He obviously has moved up a tiny bit, but I gave him a grade of 92. I think he's going to move way, way up as the process goes along, and he'll be like a consensus 4-star easy by the time the process is over with.
Yeah, I think so. They're going to get some senior film on him. He's going to get a little bit bigger. He's very, fast. He's just fast for his size. And I think he's like you said, a matchup problem. You don't want to put a slot corner on him. Even at 235, he can bully any slot corner that you're going to have, and a lot of safeties too. So, how do you handle this guy? And I think he's going to be a good move tight end as well. Somebody that if you put him in motion and everything, he's just too big of a body for a lot of defensive backs to handle, but yet can outrun a lot of the defensive backs too. So I think he's going to be a matchup problem for a lot of teams. And I like seeing Notre Dame go after these types of guys. I like a guy like Evan Jacobson because you need those inline blocker types. And, Ian Premer's going to have, if those two were to commit, they're going to have that big body that you can be an inline blocker. But I love having these types of guys because they become a big problem. And so I'm excited to see where that all unfolds. Obviously, it was a very big Friday for Notre Dame. First, Khary Adams commits to Notre Dame. And, going into this, I wasn't sure which guy I thought was a bigger reach, whether it was Khary Adams or Joey O'Brien. I probably felt maybe it was Adams versus O'Brien. But coming out of it, I think we were more certain that Khary Adams was going to be, a Notre Dame guy versus Joey O'Brien. I think that when you look at his potential, it's outstanding. But I think going in, we weren't quite sure where Notre Dame stood with him, where I think a lot of people felt that Joey O'Brien, Notre Dame was right there, right, very close. And so they just had to have a good visit and close this thing down. But I love Adams. Joey O'Brien can play corner. Joey O'Brien can play safety. He can play wide receiver. Adams is a corner. He could play safety. There's no doubt he could because he's big enough. But he is a guy that can play corner. You now have two corners. That allows you to do so much with Joey O'Brien because you have a guy that can play at his level. And love his film, love everything about him. I think that this is a big time pickup for Notre Dame. Your thoughts here?
Yeah, and I think he's kind of like Dallas Golden in a lot of ways, right? Where he's a guy who can play, both, or plays both ways for his high school, makes plays on both sides of the ball, but he's kind of like a longer version of him, right? And that's probably the big difference between the two. And as Greg and I said last week, he's more advanced than him on the defensive side of the ball, just in terms of, his coverage ability, and he's played more corner, although he has played some safety too. Man, he's an elite athlete, and like I said, super long, like freaky long, and just the absolute kind of guy that you look at this guy with these kind of traits and you say, man, Mike Mickens is going to do wonders with this dude. Like, that is the kind of guy that's a Mike Mickens corner right there. Yeah. So, I'm think that he has a ceiling as high as just about any corner, in the entire, recruiting class, like in the entire 2026 cycle. I believe that's true. To me, he's like a borderline top 50 kid, and really, really just like an outstanding prospect. And that was the highest guy that I had out of all the guys that Notre Dame offered.
Yeah, I think he's got a lot of potential and could just do so many different things for you. You start to look at this now, Jamie, and it's just incredible when you look at the size and the athleticism. When you look at what they've got coming in as far as commitments right now, Joey O'Brien 6'3", Aiden Pouncey 6'3", Khary Adams, I think he looks almost 6'3". I mean, he's tall, he really is, and even Chaston Smith at 6'2". I mean, that is some just pure huge height that you have just coming in at defensive end or defensive back, which is really kind of just mind-blowing to think. You add it with guys like a Jadon Blair, Tay Johnson, very tall guys already. Tabor and Benny Powell's already a pretty long guy. Ethan Long is a long guy. Creed Thomas is not a short guy either. They've got so much length that they have. We know that Carson Hobbs is 6'1". We know that Leonard Moore is 6'2". This is just, they're going to be a difficult team to throw over. They just are. That extra length, that's the difference of fingers batting a ball away, versus a 5'11" corner where you just don't get there, and that's really we've seen how small windows are between winning and losing in a lot of games. And usually it's fingers are the difference. And so I'm very excited about this. I cannot believe that they're in this situation at defensive back. It's not even close to any other situation in all the years that I've covered it or even really followed it. Notre Dame's never had this kind of talent, this kind of athleticism, and certainly not this kind of size at defensive back. And, I know Ohio State gets a lot of credit for the defensive backs they produce, and, LSU's done a pretty good job over the years, and there's some other schools who've done a good job producing. I'm telling you, I think Notre Dame's going to be pushing very soon. You're going to start to see a lot of guys, first, second round draft picks coming out of Notre Dame. We already, had one in Ben Moe who probably should have been a first rounder, but had that issue. But I think you're going to start to see a whole lot of guys start to get drafted in the first couple rounds of the draft here from Notre Dame. That's going to be very, very exciting. And man, I can't be more pleased with where this is at. Your thoughts here?
Well, the depth, I think, is the one thing too that probably doesn't get talked about enough. Is when you talk about all those guys and you think about last year, and obviously they had an outstanding secondary last year. But when Morrison went down, and then Mickey opted out, they went from like having 4 corners to 2, and they really didn't have anybody else ready that they thought was ready to play corner at that, at a level that they needed to when they were in the playoffs, which is why I think partially why Christian Gray kind of wore down a bit at the end of the year, right? Like, you're playing 70 snaps a game. That's tough, right? So now I think already this year, they're going to be deeper at corner this year. I think that's a given, but just in the future years, you look at how everything is kind of stacked up. They're going to have a lot of options. They should be able to play, 4, 5 corners, in a year where, I mean, Mike, you and I have followed Notre Dame football long enough to know that there's been years where they struggle to find 2, so, it's an absolute different era in terms of what they've done there. And then obviously too, you can mix and match guys and there's some of these guys are going to be nickel, play the nickel. Some of these guys are maybe going to move to safety. They can do all these different things when you get this type of athletes, when you get this many athletes.
Yeah. And I mean, you start to think, I mean, I watched Chasten Smith's video over the weekend. You forget about that's a talented football player. I rewatched Aiden Pouncey and I'm like, man, I mean, that guy is just incredibly talented football player. And so it's just nuts to think that this is where we're at. We definitely need to talk about the Joey O'Brien commitment. First of all, I love the press conference. It's a no BS press conference. Go in there, thank everybody, do what you got to do. No hat tricks, none of that stuff. Stand up and talk about, why you chose Notre Dame. But, I think the best thing said about that, and I hope Notre Dame is putting that out there in that press conference, was him talking about Marcus Freeman and how that's a guy, I want to go into battle with. I trust my life with that guy. I think that is why we're seeing them close so strong is, I've mentioned this many times before. When you have an it guy, an it coach, man, I'm telling you, things can just explode. And that's what Urban Meyer was, right? That's why Urban Meyer was so successful, was people were just attracted to his personality, his swagger, and who he is. Now, Urban's a different swagger than Marcus Freeman, but Marcus Freeman has swag. I mean, he's got some swagger to him. There's no doubt about it. We don't see it as much as we do probably on the football field or when he's just kind of joking around with people. We don't see it as much in the professional environment. But I think that this is why we're starting to see, of course, obviously the good coaching and the great job of recruiting by everybody else. But I do think that the Marcus Freeman factor is starting to really start to hit home with a lot of these guys. And boy, I tell you what, you have another good season this year. You go play for a national championship. Gosh, if you win it, holy crap, what would happen then? But I am so excited about just the way Joey O'Brien talked about Marcus Freeman. First of all, let's talk about Joey O'Brien, what you like, what you think he's going to do, and then just his comments about Marcus Freeman.
Yeah, I guess I'll start with the Freeman comments. I think it just kind of shows everything that we thought about Marcus Freeman, where he's got a magnetic personality. I think anyone who's around him can feel it. And I think all that really needed to happen for them to get like the next level of guys was people liked him. I think that's why, say a guy like Caleb Downs was really interested in Notre Dame. A lot of it was because Marcus Freeman. But there needed to be a little bit more proof of concept of him like winning and doing the things that, because there's a lot of guys that people like as coaches, but in order to get those elite guys, you kind of need more than just that. And well, he went out and did it last year. And I think that has been like, the biggest thing, because it's one thing for like Brian Kelly to win and he's not even around, really like barely talking to guys until they get on the visits and really, and even then he's not really the same kind of personality that a Freeman is, but Freeman is just like, it's all set up. And once you get around that and you see the culture, and I think probably something that doesn't get talked about enough is that the players that are on the team and the culture, you can hear it when like they talk and when they talk about each other. And that helps when those guys get on campus too, and they kind of build around that. So that's something that attracts a guy like Joey O'Brien too, who, you want to play with good players, but you also want to play with like good teammates and guys that you like, you want to go to battle with. So as a prospect, man, he's just got special talent. Obviously there's so few guys that are his height, that have that kind of height and length and that kind of athleticism that he has. Anyone who's seen his basketball highlights, man, he can get up and like he's an above the rim player. He's big time ball skills, dominant in 7-on-7 stuff, but you can see it obviously with him as a receiver. Like, I mean, that's a heck of a catch, one-handed grab right there. But you see that kind of the ball skills, you see the instincts, you see, obviously he's not afraid to come up and lay a lick there too. I don't think he's quite like I would say he's not quite at the same level of a prospect as Kyle Hamilton, because I think Kyle Hamilton was just a little bit better as like a downhill, like running the alley type of player, and just was like a slightly like just better instincts. He just had just incredible instincts. But I mean, O'Brien is very close, and I think it isn't far fetched to compare him to Kyle Hamilton. I think really that's the kind of guy that he can be, except for he's going to be surrounded by better players than when Hamilton was on the team. So he'll probably be able to get to do more things and be a little bit more versatile than Hamilton would have, because they needed Kyle Hamilton to play deep as a safety like a lot of the times. And with O'Brien, I think they can move him around and make him a chess piece.
Exactly. I think with Hamilton, the thing that stood out to me more than anything with Kyle Hamilton was just his instincts. He's one of the most instinctual players that you find, a guy just who is always around the football. Joey O'Brien's a better athlete, I think. Not as tall, though, not as quite as long, but I do think he's a better athlete. But you can't, I don't, if you ask me, would I rather have the instincts or the athlete? I'd rather have the instincts, but we'll see what happens with O'Brien. I think he's played so much of both sides that sometimes, if you focus a little bit more on one, you become a lot better than you were. So we'll see. But I think you play him both ways if you can. I really do. He's a good receiver. He's a guy who can go up and get the football, and his fluidity in his hips is unreal for a guy that is 6'3". He can turn very easily. And, a lot of people are like, well, can he really play corner? And it's like, just watch the guy turn. You can see him turn, and his ability to kind of explode out of those turns is really not something you see for guys with his length. And so I really, really think that he's a tremendous talent, and I cannot wait to see what happens with him. Jamie, then when we look at the situation, there's a lot of spots that are kind of we're just not sure with. We don't know with Kaydon Finley exactly what's going on, but it sure sounds like things are trending in the right way. I talked last week, and I made the point that I just felt the kid felt like he knew where he was going. I felt like he had made up his decision, and that's why we had got, pretty strong feeling heading into that. Now, I don't mean to hint, because that's not what I'm saying at all. I'm not saying, oh, well, he, silently committed to Notre Dame or anything like that. I just feel like Notre Dame felt like, well, I think this kid's made up his mind. I think he knows that Notre Dame's the best place for him. He hasn't told us that, but I get the feeling he's feeling that way. And I said at the time, look, if that's the case, if he's made that decision, that was a hard decision to make, because he knows how much blowback he's going to get for not choosing Texas if he does. And therefore, I didn't think that Texas, there was much they could do to kind of change his line of thinking if that was going to be the case. And it almost seems like that's what happened. I think Texas went into it going, maybe Notre Dame made up some ground, but, we're Texas, and his father played here, and, we know he likes Texas, and blah, blah, blah. And then it almost seemed from like the very beginning of the visit towards the end, we started getting a little updates here from some of our Texas people that we know. And they're like, geez, I don't know. It's not going as well as I think a lot of people were hoping. So, if they can land him, man, that's going to really solve some problems for Notre Dame, because while I like Dylan Faison, I like Devin Fitzgerald, I love Bubba Frazier, and if they get Braden Robinson, I'm excited about that. What they do need more than anything is a Jaden Greathouse, and that is somebody who can come in and play right away. I think you need in every class at least one guy who can come in and play right away. This is the guy that can come in and play right away. He's a Greathouse type of player, and I think it was important. It is important to land that kind of guy. So to me, I think that this is one of the top guys left that they got to swing, Jamie, and it sounds like it's trending that way. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I think physically and technically, he's a guy who should be able to step onto campus and jump into the mix right away. And that obviously is rare to find that. just period. And for Notre Dame to land that is even more rare. So I think he's a critical guy in the class. I'm a huge fan of his game. I think he is easily the most important guy still left on the board, and that's not taking anything away from Elijah Golden, because obviously, Golden's a big time prospect. They need him as well. But I really just think what you're looking at receiver, and especially when you're talking about where Notre Dame, I think in the next 2 years, like this year and the next year, are really going to be in a great position to like win now, like to contend for a championship these next 2 years, and hopefully beyond as well. But so you want to get a guy like Finley, and that guy can help you win a championship in year one because he's just contributing. I'm not saying he's going to be a superstar. I'm just talking about contributing right away and be someone who's going to help the team right away. And that's the way that I kind of view him.
What do you think is the upside of Devin Fitzgerald? What do you think is, if he develops, how good can he be?
I mean, I certainly think he can be an NFL player, and I'm obviously that's not crazy considering who his father is. But I like him a lot as as a big boundary guy, guy who can go up and get it. I think he's probably not like the most crazy speed guy out there. But I think too, there's a little bit that reminds me of his dad too, where I think he probably plays faster than he times. Like he's pretty fast on the field. Like I think he looks fast on tape to me. And then I look at him too as where you're talking about the boundary and where the fit is at Notre Dame. Like I think he's a guy who absolutely could come in and be a player on the boundary, which is what they need. They need that kind of size too. So I just think ball skills, all that kind of stuff, compete level. Obviously, he's going to be a guy who is a really refined player. Once he finishes school in college. So I think with all that, I see a guy, maybe not like a dynamic first round draft pick guy, but I think he has a chance to be definitely an NFL player.
I do too. I think it's going to take a little bit for him. He needs to get a little bit bigger and stronger, but I do think he's going to. But I think with him, the ball skills are what stand out to me, and the compete level. I think that those are the two things that I like the most about him, and kind of reminds me of. I don't think he's near as polished as a Greathouse, but I think that's what you're going to get when it's all said and done. I think that he can be that type of player, which obviously has turned out to be a pretty good thing for Notre Dame. I think Notre Dame's going to get Fitzgerald. I really do. I'm very hopeful on Finley. I'm just not quite as sure on that situation right now. Braden Robinson. I'm going to give you my thoughts on it real quick, and I want to see if you track with me. I think you take him because one, return guys are important. They are very important, and I think you're going to start to see returns become more of a factor here as people figure out the new rules and the best way to combat it, and also teams trying to take more chances and trying to gain some extra yards by doing it. So I think that's important. But the other thing that stands out to me, this guy's a damn good receiver. He's different than say an Amir Carlisle. Or the running back that just went to Virginia, that played running back and moves. Yeah, different than Tyree. The same kind of body, right? Robinson may be a little bit smaller, but I think Robinson is quicker than either of those guys. I think his feet are quicker than either of those guys, and I think he can make people miss a little bit better than those guys, but. You also look at the actual number of receptions the guy has had and the big plays that he makes. And none of those guys made that as a receiver. So to me, that's why I'm intrigued by this guy. You need a gadget player. Is he going to be an every down player? I don't know. But one thing he can do is catch the football, and he's got really good hands and runs good routes. And I think he can be a guy that is going to be a problem when you put him out there. So I I take him because I think a lot of people look at it and say, well, Amir Carlisle didn't quite live up to it, and Tyree was good but not great. I just think that this guy's so much further along than those guys, but yet gives you all the other things that those guys did. Your thoughts here?
Yeah, and then also too, you've seen that Mike Brown has had success with guys who are similar to that, right? Like Tyler Scott was a guy who was, 5'10", 170, not the biggest guy, became, a pretty high NFL pick and an explosive receiver. Was a guy who converted from running back, right? Who became a pretty darn good receiver. So I think you see that kind of thing, and you look at, well, maybe that's what Robinson could be. The other thing is that, and I do think, I mean, the size could be the biggest issue for him to being an every down player, right? Because I do think that there's a thing about like, no block, no rock, right? Like that could be a thing. Like, how's he going to be as a blocker? All that is something to think about. But when you get a guy with explosive speed, and you get a guy who could, help you in the return game, maybe even be like, one of the best returners in the country. He's got that kind of ability. Well, that's just someone that if he's on your roster, he could just help you win a game just because of one play. One play. That's all it takes, right? That he takes one play. And I think of even a guy like Michael Young, who wasn't, obviously like a great player at Notre Dame. He, became a starter and a pretty good player for Cincinnati. But even in that 2018 season where he played and he was like the fourth receiver, well, he just made like two plays in the season. One was a touchdown on a post route, 47-yard touchdown against Northwestern, and the other one was like took a hitch. They took 60-something yards. They got in the red zone against Wake Forest. Just those two plays right there was like, yeah, he's worth it to have on your team. Like, that's the kind of thing. And that's what you can get with Robinson. Like, I really do think that.
Who was the kid from Marshall last year? Made the huge play in the Georgia game. Yeah,
exactly.
Made the huge play in the, and then made a couple of really key plays in the playoffs as well. A couple very key plays. So, you need somebody to make those plays. And I think that this kid's going to be somebody that is going to work hard, and I think he's going to be a plus when it's all said and done. All right, so then you're looking at tight end. We know Fryzel's in. We got Evan Jacobson. We've got Ian Premer. If you're Notre Dame, do you take both? What do you do? And let me preface this by saying, what if Jacobson doesn't commit before Premer and Premer commits before Jacobson? Then what do you do? Your thoughts?
I think if you're hard stuck on two and Premer commits, then I think you just take Premer and Fryzel probably. But if Jacobson commits, I think Premer's the kind of guy that you just take regardless, because I really think that he's, a lot like Fryzel, but a better version of him right now. But yeah, I would say equally high ceilings. Like, both these guys can be just, dominant receivers as tight ends and matchup problems, but he's just too talented to turn away. Like, I think, kind of similar to if, Notre Dame with like Dre Quinn, and obviously he committed to Clemson, but I thought Dre Quinn, and he was not the same kind of rating as Premer, but in my opinion, if I'm thinking about a guy with a super high ceiling as an edge rusher and a defensive lineman, that'd be a guy worth taking because of what his ceiling could be, that you would take. Maybe they're not going to take a fifth guy. Well, that would be a fifth guy that you were taking. And same thing at tight end, right? I think you have to look at that at every kind of position, right? You have to really look at that is like, if you're going to take an extra guy, like, what's this guy's ceiling? Because if his ceiling is that high, I just don't know how you can say no to that.
It was interesting because, like, I love Dre Quinn too, and I know Notre Dame was concerned that he would grow out a defensive end, which I'd heard they thought he could potentially be 280 pounds, and I'm like, well, I mean, I suppose that's possible, but Bryce Young's going to probably be pretty close to that.
He is going to be 2-8. Yeah,
exactly. So
you might be a cheeseburger away right now.
Exactly. So, and it's working out for him. So I would have taken Dre Quinn regardless. I think Notre Dame would have too. But I also think that they were okay if he didn't, because I think a lot of people thought he was going to be more of a Viper. And I do agree. I think he probably would have grown into more of a strong side defensive end. But I think Notre Dame also felt like he probably would have grown to more of a 3-tech. And I don't know. They clearly know more about it than I do, but I do think he has such good twitch, very good anticipation off the ball. I just really liked him, and I hate that Clemson got yet another really good defensive lineman that they're going to have to play against, and that I hate that fact, but it just is what it is. I'm certainly not crying over the situation right now. Charlie Thom, what do you think here? What do you think his upside is? Could he be an alt? Do you think his athleticism is less than, say, Black? Do you think it's on par with McHugh? How do you look at his upside?
Well, I think exactly the reason why you would, because when we're talking about the 6th offensive lineman, and like, well, they're going to take this guy hasn't even played a year of offensive line. You take him because of the upside and because of, what he possibly could be. And I don't think it's not a coincidence that he just worked out and, he hasn't played offensive tackle, at the, prep level yet he all of a sudden blew up with Power 4 offers after this, the workout at the, New England showcase. And then he went to Penn State, worked out with they had commits there at their camp that they were working. He earned an offer there, went to Notre Dame. Obviously he earned an offer after that. I don't think people understand quite like what some of his like athletic numbers like suggest of like how that kind of, matches up with certain guys. So, he ran 506, a 506.40, at 275 pounds, broad jump 9.3. Felix Ojo, who we are big fans of, Mike, we obviously think the guy is, I would say he's an exceptional athlete for a guy who's a left tackle. Well, 272 pounds, he ran a 5.31. His Tom's vert was close to 30 inches. Ojo's 22.7. His broad jump was 7.10. So it's not close when you're talking about just like straight up like athleticism and like, explosive testing and stuff. It's a reason why they test it, right? Like there's a reason for it. And if you go back and you look at like what some of the guys did. So Will Campbell was a top 5 pick in the draft. This was at, he's obviously 320 pounds, but he broad jumped 9.5, Joe Alt broad jumped 9.4. And Thom isn't probably, those numbers aren't going to go down for him. They might go up, right? So if you think about all that kind of stuff, he obviously he's got physical development. He's got a ton of technical development to do, but they wouldn't have had him in camp and said, he can't, we don't think he can, if they don't think he could do this stuff, they wouldn't have offered him. And they also wouldn't still take him. There would be no reason. So I think anyone who looks at like, say, oh, well, look at where this guy was before. It's like, this is 100% when you're talking about taking advantage of the 105 and the extra scholarships you have, this is what you do. This is what you do and take that. So could he be Joe Alt? Like, I mean, it's impossible to say because, Joe Alt was not close to Joe Alt. Like, we didn't think Joe Alt was going to be Joe Alt when they offered him, right? Like, I thought he had a chance to be really good. I liked that they offered him, but I thought it was going to take a long time for Joe Alt. I thought it was going to be like, well, a couple years in and we'll see where he's at. I didn't know he was going to show up at 300 pounds and be like, hey, I think he might be better than Blake Fisher right away. Like, he was right there with Blake Fisher, who had already been on campus. Like, so it was shocking that he gained all that weight and was still able to be that athlete and then, made the transition basically in his only second year of offensive line play. So I think that Thom is going to be Alt, he doesn't have a Pro Bowl dad who's going to
Yeah.
teach him all these things. And
That's
so
why Joel was old. Yeah.
that was why he was that quickly, for sure. And
absolutely.
so I think with Thom, it's probably going to take some patience. But the thing is that they can afford to be patient, because if you look at what they have at offensive tackle, and especially what they got in the last class, he probably wasn't going to beat those guys out right away. So he's going to have to take some time. But his ceiling is, like, you think about it, that's the kind of guy that becomes a first round draft pick that day, that kind of athlete. So maybe he's doesn't work out. And obviously higher ranked guys, it doesn't work out. But if you're thinking about a guy who's like a tight end who ends up being like the Joe Staley, the Brian O'Neill from Pitt or whatever, like Mikio is in that kind of mold too, right? Where he just has 1 year. He's gonna have 2 years of offensive tackle before, but he's only got 1 year right now. But that's one of the reasons that people are so high on Mikio, because they're like, man, this guy's huge. He's not like doing friggin' backflips and he's an insane athlete, and he's only going to get better. And so Thom, if I just looked at his tight end film, and I would say, like, you can't just judge it, but then you have the other information, and you have to take that information. And to me, that makes him a super intriguing guy. And I think Notre Dame fans should be excited if they get a guy like that, because you just don't know, like, he could be another one of the next in line high picks there if he develops. He's got to put in the work, but we'll see.
I think what says everything about this is they didn't need him, and a lot of people, and look, they need numbers at other places too, but they're still going to take him. And the reason they're taking him is because they're excited about him. That's why. And look, I think Matty Augustine's going to be a really good player at Notre Dame. We watched enough of him. I've seen enough of him to say, I think he's got something that gets you excited. I don't think he was quite Anthony Knapp, but he was pretty close to that, when I was able to watch him in the spring game. And so I think he's a type of guy that is going to be pretty exciting player. But wouldn't it be amazing if you could take a Matty Augustine and play him at guard with that kind of agility and that kind of ability? Plus, he shows the nastiness that he has. And you do that because you feel so good at what you have out at tackle. Now you've got one of the best athletic guards in the country, because this guy can flat move. He's fast enough to play right tackle. Could, has the foot speed to do that, but you put him at guard and he's still got that kind of nasty mentality, which I really liked about him. And now you've got what you're looking for, which is, now we're really elite as athletes, but also we got some meanness and some toughness and that type of thing. So the way I look at it is they're gonna be athletic enough on the edge because they have enough of these types of players. We forget about Prescott, who's a very athletic guy. I mean, he was recruited to play left tackle, and everything I've seen, he looks like he can do it. He looks like he could play there and be a high level player. And then you've got Black, and you've got Mikio, and you've got Augustine, and you could potentially have Thom on top of that. And so you got 5 options there in the last 2 classes, and you're like, oh boy, this could be crazy. We'll see how this all goes. So I'm excited about the whole offensive line situation, especially if they land him, because that just gives you so many options. And who knows, maybe Thom grows into just a ball busting guard with that kind of athleticism. Maybe he's the guy that moves inside, because he's going to be big enough. Certainly. I mean, I expect him to be at least 290 when he enrolls next year. If he's 270 now, he'll easily be 290 next year for sure, if not more. So I'd definitely take him. Now, if he were 250, I could see why you may not, but he's all of 270, and so I definitely jump all over that. All right, we've got Elijah Golden. Everything I hear about this, I feel good. I feel real good about it. So, I know people are going to sweat it. I get it. Until somebody says they're going to do something, I tend not to get overly excited either. But I just feel like this kid is like Notre Dame for a very long time. I think Notre Dame's been his leader for a very long time. I don't think anything changed in his visit. And I also don't think anything's going to change between now and when he decides. I feel pretty confident he's going to choose Notre Dame. And let's say he does, Jamie. What does that do for this defensive lineman when you look at the four they're bringing in and what they got last year? How do you see all that fitting together?
Well, I mean, easily, I would say just from like a traits perspective, if we're talking about just guys who are like long and athletic, this is like the freakiest group that I can remember Notre Dame bringing in. So if you add Golden to, Dunham and Ewatade and Tiki Hola, who's, already 300 pounds, he's going to get even bigger. Like, these guys are super long. They're going to be huge when you're talking about like where Notre Dame is at and them kind of matching up. Matt Freeman always kind of talks about he goes on the road to these games to cover the team, and he sees like, well, Notre Dame doesn't look like Clemson. Notre Dame doesn't look like it. Well, they're about to with these kind of guys, right? And I think that's one of the things. I think with Golden, he is someone that I think has a lot of room to grow too, in terms of not just his size, he's going to get bigger too, but a lot of room to grow as a player, where I think there's a lot of like consistency and technical stuff that he needs to get better at. But if he does achieve that kind of stuff, is the kind of guy that you say like, wow, he's going to be a high pick. But I think with defensive linemen, sometimes it can hit quicker than others, but there's a lot. Even if you look at like a Bryce Young, you can see all the tools last year, but then you saw this spring, you're like, oh, he's putting it more together. And you saw it when he was putting it more together last year. And I think the same kind of thing with Golden is that's where you could see that with him, right? Like a guy who's probably not going to be like an instant impact guy, where I think like Rodney Dunham could be somebody who's like, I mean, I would almost be shocked if Rodney Dunham isn't someone who plays right away and like makes an impact, at least as a very least as a pass rusher. But I think we were talking about this. I like the edges they brought in the last class. I really like Chris Burgess. I mean, we've heard a lot of good things about him. Yeah. Just in him reporting right here in the summer and what he looks like physically. And I'm excited about it. I was really excited about his senior film. I'm high on Dom Hulak too. Like, I think he's a big time athlete and some guy that, he's going to be maybe not the biggest guy, not like freaky long, but he's twitchy. And I'm kind of excited to see where he goes as an edge rusher. And then I think a lot of it, for the reason why a Golden is so important, is because when I think about some of the other guys, like Golden has development he's going to do, but I think Golden is probably going to be around like 280, 290 when he walks onto campus. He's around 260, 270 right now. And where guys like Joseph Rafe, Gordy Self-said, like those are guys that going to need time to, add that kind of weight that they're probably going to need to. And I mean, we'll see what happens. We'll see where they're at when, August rolls around, because there's always guys who like make jumps and whatever. Once they get into Notre Dame's program, certainly like look at Cole Mullins is like a completely different guy than when he's there. I'm actually excited to, not to mention, I'm excited to see Cole Mullins this summer, but I think, they fit more into that Mullins thing where it's like, hey, this is long-term, right? This is long-term, and where are they going to be at? So, with Golden, I mean, physically, I think technically he's not going to be someone who comes in right away, but I don't think long-term, like he would be a guy that I would think year 2, he's going to be in the rotation at the very least, like that kind of guy. Like he's got, and just a different kind of traits than some of the other guys.
All right. So last on the list right now is Nick Reddish, who I also think they're going to get. It was interesting. I think a lot of people thought that Notre Dame led, and I think they did lead going into most of it. But I think Virginia Tech did a good job and pulled even. Sounds like Notre Dame is really trending positively right now. Will most likely land him. And to be honest with you, I don't think Notre Dame would have canceled the Donovan Webb visit if they didn't feel really good about getting Nick Reddish. I just don't think they would have. And so I think that means that Notre Dame's in great shape with Nick Reddish. And, I will say this. We talked about it last week. I really like Donovan Webb. And to be honest with you, I think Donovan Webb's upside may be even better than Nick Reddish. I just think Nick Reddish's instincts are really, really good. But I would have loved to have Donovan Webb too. I think that guy's a good football player. I'm going to hate to see him go to Michigan if that's where he ends up, because I do think he's a good football player. But Nick Reddish, I think you add him into this mix and stuff. There's a lot of things he could do. Is he? I don't know if he's twitchy enough to play a nickel slot corner situation. I don't know if he's twitchy enough to do that. But I do think he's a guy who can. He's just very physical, very smart on the football field, and Yama, if you look at that situation and somehow you can walk out of there with Khary Adams, Chaston Smith, Aiden Pouncey, Nick Reddish, Joey O'Brien, I mean, not in a million, I shouldn't say a million years, but I don't think anybody thought that that's the way this was going to end up. I think we had hoped, but man, this is pretty good, and just the athleticism of this group is off the charts. It's very exciting, especially if they can add Nick Reddish to the mix here. But I really like him, and I like his instincts. So thoughts on him real quick, and then we'll get to a few questions. We're not going to have a whole lot of time here, but we'll get to a few questions. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, I think, when you're talking about his instincts and it's just this like football intelligence, that's why he could maybe play a little bit of nickel, because, that is a position that you gotta, it's not obviously just short area quickness and to be able to carry a thing vertically. Like, you gotta be a really smart player. You gotta be able to stick your nose in and play the run and do all that kind of thing. So I could see him being a nickel. And I think, he's a very smart, instinctive football player. And that's always a good guy to have there. And I, just a little quick thing, because I know like a lot of people thought, well, his brothers are at Virginia Tech, and that was something. And I'm not saying his brothers are unhappy there. I don't think that. I haven't heard that or anything like that. But I have to think that Virginia Tech hasn't really been that successful. Like, they're not like, it's not the same as it was under Beamer. Like, they're not winning like that. If it was that, I bet you'd say, hey, he's probably going to choose Virginia Tech. But there's a reason why like a guy like Jalen Strollman transfers out as a senior to play at a place like Notre Dame rather than stay at Virginia Tech. And same thing where Notre Dame's got a good chance with Nick Reddish, is because Notre Dame's in a different category than Virginia Tech.
Yeah. I don't think there's any question about that. So we got some questions here. I'm just gonna try and grab some. Jaboski wants to know, and he's been beating us up about this for a long time. Now that the 2027 quarterback offers are out, who do you hope we land? And for those that don't know, Georgia quarterback Teddy Gerard was offered. And so was Louisiana quarterback Peyton Houston. Yama, we'll get your thoughts. I'll throw a few in after that as well.
Well, I really like Gerard. He's a guy that I thought that they should have offered, and I'm glad they did. I think he's, a better athlete. Not like quite a dual threat, but like a guy who can definitely escape. He's a baseball player as well. He's legit 6'3", big hands, like good athlete. He can run. Just, I wouldn't say he's like a guy that you're going to make as a focal point, like a Riley Leonard part of your offense. I like him. I'm a fan of his. Peyton Houston, I love his film. He is another big time athlete and just crazy numbers. And got some like electric improv stuff. I think he's kind of like a little bit of like a Kyler Murray type, but obviously size wise too. But not quite as the same level of athlete as Kyler Murray. Like, Kyler Murray is a different athlete. So, and he's got small hands like that. And that is a thing like that is a real thing. So that was one of the reasons why I didn't think he was going to get offered by Notre Dame. But I'll say this, like, I would almost be shocked if he isn't like an ultra exciting college football player at wherever he goes. So I like both the guys. If I had to choose who I prefer more, I'd be Gerard.
It's so hard because you hate to kind of miss the potential boom of what Houston could bring, because he could seriously bring some real boom. I it's just hard to let that go. I think if I felt Notre Dame had in the previous two classes a guy that I really loved, like really loved, then I would definitely go after Houston. But I just don't think they have that, in my opinion. That's just my opinion. That doesn't mean that that's Notre Dame's opinion. But I just don't see a guy that I like, man, I absolutely think this guy's going to be a really good player. So let's take a chance and get the boom of Houston. If I guess, I don't know who Notre Dame likes better, but I do think that Gerard's the safer choice. And if the situation at quarterback remains what it is, it's going to be hard to see how much can Grubbs progress as a senior. How much does Aber learn? Look, I mean, Aber, like I said, I don't ever want to sound like I'm down on him. He's got physical tools to be a really good player. It's just I feel like he's got a long way to go to get there as far as the mechanics of things and the knowledge of things and the accuracy and all those types of things that you need to be a really good quarterback. So if I felt like that was a better situation than it currently is, I'd definitely go with Houston. But I agree with you now. I think right now, for what I know now, I would go Gerard, but we'll have to see how things pan out. If we land Golden, do you expect them to take one more D-line? And he says he would like to shoot for 5. I mean, I think they're pressing numbers right now, especially if they take Thom and they take 3 tight ends. I just don't see how you can do that. You start to take away from your opportunities in 2027. And there's a lot of good football players in 2027 that they have a great shot at. I mean, here's the thing that people need to understand is as good as this class is, and it is exciting, you need to look at Notre Dame's pot of gold day. How many of those guys have visited already? I mean, that hasn't happened until really this year, Jamie. They'd send out a lot of pot of gold guys, and they may get, 15 of them tops, show up. They've had a lot of those dudes show up. And that tells me that there's a lot of those guys that are interested in Notre Dame and want to get to know them. And the fact that Notre Dame got them in so early, I think, gives them a real chance, right? Gives them a real chance. So you don't want to crap on 2027 just to take a guy. So, unless it's somebody as good as like a Dre Quinn, I wouldn't take anybody else at D-line. Your thoughts?
Yeah, that's how I see it. Unless there's somebody that they loved from before that opens up and then they want to revisit it. I don't really see that. I guess there could be some kind of D-line version of Thom, whatever that kind of pops up that they just absolutely love. But why not just kind of wait for that person to actually be there rather than searching for it, I guess, right? Like, is the way I would approach it.
All right, now that we've gone through the officials, what's a realistic dream finish now? And I think we just kind of went through it. I think that there's a really good chance that they could land all those guys. Honestly do. I think there's a really good chance they could land every one of those guys. And, whether they'll land them all, I don't know. I'd say the ones that I feel probably the least sure about right now would be Premer, Jacobson, and Finley. Everybody else, I feel I'll be shocked if all those guys, other than those 3, don't commit. So I feel real good about that. I feel probably pretty good on Finley. I'd say there's a chance it's probably better than not that he commits. The other 2, I'm just not sure. I really just don't know where they're at right now. Neither one talks a whole lot. And I think this week we'll have a better understanding of where they're at with that. Let's see. I know people want to know, is Notre Dame content with Grubbs at quarterback? Even if we knew the answer that it was no, we would never say that. We would never say that.
Yeah.
We would never say that. So don't ask the question because we don't know. And even if we did know, we would never answer it. That would not be a good situation for anybody to have people answering that. So I think as of now that they're not recruiting anybody, nobody's on the radar that we know about, nothing. So, I think that they're fine with where they're at. And let's be honest, Grubbs, they liked him for a reason. he has potential to be a really good player. All right. Let's see. Can you discuss and rank the factors that have led to the increased success in recruiting compared to, say, 5 years ago? More active recruiting head coach, NIL operation in order, proof of concept in post the season, or anything else I'm forgetting? What's been the most difference? I don't know if there's been a most difference. I think it's been a combination of all those things. But I do think that Notre Dame is more committed to being a great program than they've probably been in a while. And I think, they have 32 million reasons right now to do that, and every year. And so I think that that's part of it. I think that the biggest thing is they've hired the right guy. They've hired the guy that has the vision, that has the it factor. I think that is a big part of it. And I think that their recruiting situation is well organized now. I think that they have a message, and it's not all about kind of one guy or two guys. I think it's all about the program, and I think that that's important. I think the message of what they're preaching is consistent, but also just as important is that it's proving that it's working. Like, they know what they're doing, and they also have the ability to develop you as a very good football player. And by the way, they can show that by look at how these guys have developed. And then two, if you are a freshman, we will play you. Leonard Moore, there's plenty of guys. Bryce Young, there's plenty of guys you can point to. If you're good enough, you're going to play. Anything you want to add, Jamie?
Yeah, I really think all those things he listed too are all factors. It's all the combinations of everything, right? Like, because I would say, like, even a few years ago when NIL, was starting to become like a real big issue in terms of like what it meant for recruiting. Well, Notre Dame approaches it different now than they did then, right? So that's part of it. They approach like NIL the team different. Obviously, there's going to be different things that change with the house settlement and all that too, but where I just don't think there aren't the areas where Notre Dame was deficient like they were before, just in general.
Yep. Yeah, and I think they're very consistent, Jamie, in that they fill their needs. I mean, under Brian Kelly, certainly under Charlie Weiss, and definitely under Tyrone Willingham, every year there'd be two or three positions where they would just absolutely flame out, and it would always come back and bite them, always. And under Marcus Freeman, they've just done a very good job of consistently filling their needs with good quality players. Now, was every guy the best player? No, but you could go out and compete with these guys. And now you're starting to get some of the even better players that are out there. All right. What do you think of Notre Dame just offering two quarterbacks in the 2027 class? Do you think that will hurt them, with the others being that they might feel like they're plan B guys? And, a lot of people have asked this question, and I think it comes down to this. I think what has happened here is they've probably ranked their five guys, and the top two guys they'd like a shot at. I think the problem with 3, 4, and 5 is if they offer 3, 4, and 5, chances are they're probably going to commit, and they'd never get a chance at 1 and 2. And so you run into that risk every time, and you want to bring all your quarterbacks on the thing, but it's a good problem to have. Will you turn some people off? You may. You very well may. But if you want to be the best, you got to go out and get some of the very best players you can, and you can't be afraid to try and recruit some people. And I realize that, it didn't work out so well with Deuce Knight. I realize that, and that's frustrating. But you got to hope that the next time it does. And the fact that a lot of the things that Notre Dame has done to fix things within the program and things like that'll really help. I think what'll help too with quarterback, Jamie, is if the guy that they have that starts this year comes out and plays well, right? He doesn't need to be, a Heisman Trophy winner, But as long as the kid looks competent and looks like, man, this guy's going to be pretty good, I think that's going to help quarterback recruiting tremendously. Your thoughts here?
Oh yeah, like well, look at all like the default guys like Drew Aller. Drew Aller laid just a complete egg against Notre Dame in the semifinal. Yet because it's like, well, there are not too many returning quarterbacks, and this guy kind of showed something last year. He's being talked about as like, well, potential first round pick. I'm like, he just kind of by default, that's what happens with some of these guys. So, or Cade Klubnik had like spent the time to kind of like build up to that point. So if their quarterback this year plays pretty well, guess what? Next year, that guy is going to be hyped. He is going to be very hyped. I mean, look at Quinn. Look at what happened with Brady Quinn, and look at what happened with Kaiser. Same thing, right? Like they just haven't had that guy who people thought was going to be. If Ian Book looked like more of like a traditional like first round pick, he would have been hyped like that too. But he didn't look like that. So I think whoever it is this year, like Minchie or Carr, both those guys kind of have that kind of look to them in terms of what they have physically and everything they can do. So if they play well, those guys are going to get hyped.
Yeah. Exciting to see what happens. A guy wants to know, can you make an educated guess on which of our 2026 recruits will make your Fab 50?
Early, I mean, I've done them for sure. O'Brien and Adams both, could make it. And then we'll kind of see, where things go in terms of, who could ultimately get there. Cause, Bryce Young was a guy that I thought when he committed, I was like, this is a guy, he's not a top 50 player right now, but he could end up being, and then he did end up being. And, I would say there's, a handful of guys that could maybe, make that kind of jump up. Like, I wouldn't be shocked if all of a sudden Ewatade, you're just like, wow, like this guy just made like a crazy jump. Or I know he's like a 3-star for everybody else right now, but I'm telling you, Fryzel, who's the guy who could jump up, huge, right? And or maybe like an Aiden Pouncey or something like that, right? So those kind of guys would be guys to kind of look out for later on.
All right, not so much a question, but could you talk about Jadon Blair and what you think he becomes down the road? The depth in both quality and quantity is outstanding. Do you see him possibly breaking through at some point, or is a position change possible? Yeah, I don't think a position change is possible, but I don't think it'd be after this year for sure. I mean, they don't know what they have for the future at safety at this point. I do think Tay Johnson is a guy that is certainly somebody that they like and has a bright future, but until they see that, they don't know. Kennedy Erlacher left. How long does Adon Schuler stick around? So I think it'd be tough to move him because you just don't know. And what we saw Tabron Benny Powell in the spring game was encouraging, but he's coming back from injury. We just don't know. You have some safeties coming into this class who I think all three, we really like the safeties coming in to this class as well. So, it's possible he could move, and I really think he's a talented, prospect at wide receiver. He goes up and gets the football. He could be your boundary guy that you're missing. He very well could be, and I think he's going to be big. I don't know if you saw that picture of him, Jamie, but man, his arms are big now.
Yeah.
I mean, he's going to be a big, thick kid, and he's going to be all of 6'5" and probably 220 pounds in no time. That's just how big his body is. So he could be that guy, but I do think you want to see what he can do at safety too, because you just don't know what you have back there. Ben Minich has played some, and he actually played pretty well in the spring game, made a number of pretty nice plays. So, but I think because you have so many coming in this year, we have Ethan Long. We don't know what you have there. We haven't seen Brandon Logan yet. We have to see what you can see with him before you can kind of make something like that. But we'll have to see what happens and go from there. All right, we're going to get one more question here, and then we're going to call it because let's see. Let's see. Trying to find it. I mean, they're all good questions, but This is a good question here. How is it possible to properly evaluate talent on film when these kids play wildly different competition? How can you tell how strong, quick, fast someone is when they're running against bad competition versus good competition? I think it's a very good question, Jamie. I'll let you answer it, and if I have anything, I'll add after.
Well, I think one of the things is you're watching the player and not all the guys around him, right? So if I'm watching Christian Wilkins when he was a recruit before he was like a 5-star at Clemson, I mean, he was so much better than the New England kids he was going against. It was like comical how much better he was, but you could just see him. And I think part of it is you have to see enough. You have to watch enough players to kind of know what you're looking for and who you're looking at too. And you're watching them rather than just how much they're like dominating the players in front of them. And first of all, too, you got to know that if you're playing against these certain level of competition, well, there's a difference between dominating that level, a lower level of competition, and then a guy who's like really good against great competition too, right? So there's all of that kind of stuff that kind of goes into it. But to me, I think you focus on the traits first, right? You always focus on like, okay, like, twitchiness, I want to see, length. I want to know all of these things that go along with it to assist you in the film. Like if you got measurements and stuff, that's important. That is important to know, right? Because some guy might look a certain big, but because like you said, he's going against smaller guys. So that's why you need all that kind of extra context to be added into it. But I just really think like if you've been doing it long enough, then you kind of know when you see the guys, like you see certain guys will like, there's guys from Nebraska that you would know that stand out amongst the crowd there, and they like are different than some of the other guys. And you would only be able to tell once you've known and you've seen these guys.
Yeah. Looks like there's some weights and heights being released. Notre Dame must have released the roster. They said Mookum's 304. That's crazy. They have Lambert, they said, was 341. Massive.
Oh,
I mean,
wow.
I don't know if that's a good weight or not. They said Dawson's down to 288. Interesting. CJ 333. Oh my. Who's that? CJ. Who would that be?
I don't even know. Hold on a second here.
Who would that be?
That's Jagusa.
Oh,
that's Jagusa. Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
Oh, yeah, that's totally understandable.
That I get that. That makes sense for sure. I don't know, 341 for Lambert though. That's pretty hefty. The one that's disappointing is Logan Thomas.
He does look
218. 218 for Logan Thomas. That's not.
I saw him at Invasion, and I mean he looks still slim, right?
Yeah.
But the thing is that he doesn't have to be
third down.
If he only plays third down, it don't matter if he's 280. You know what I mean? In that sense. But obviously he's got a lot to do, and I think a lot of work to do in that. But I think a lot of people don't realize too that Julian Okwara was like 220 pounds, like his first 2 years at Notre Dame too. So it's not like it's not unheard of for some of those guys to be that.
Yeah. I just think injuries too just kind of hurt you. It just especially for a guy that needs to put on weight, and he's going to be a guy that I think is going to struggle to get to 250. You know what I mean? I don't know if he'll ever get to 250. Maybe he does, but he's kind of built like it's not going to be easy for him to add on all that weight. And so injuries, really kind of hurt your ability to add that kind of weight. All right, folks, that's going to be it. I wanted to say thanks to everybody for listening. Once again, we will have a show next week. This next week after that, we will be off. So just wanted to remind everybody of that. Thanks for listening to the show. We will talk to you next week on Power Hour.